morning. Nice to see all of you here. I just noticed that this was a very interesting session that you all were attending previously, the first one that you attended. And we look forward to having the momentum continue in this as well. So first of all, I want to thank ETHR for this opportunity. I take it as an honor to be moderating this session on the topic of transitioning from employee experience to human-centric experience. Especially a big welcome to our panelists, and I'm so glad to be sharing the stage with you. Thank you for being here. The only constant thing that we have in life is change. While we're all adapting to the opportunities and the challenges that we have, transitioning from something like an employee experience to the human-centric experience has brought in a lot of emphasis on a broader scope of where we focus on the individual, where the uniqueness of the person is what is being focused on. It's more like how we're moving out from a flip phone to a smartphone, where it's not about the device, it is about the opportunities that we have, the potential that we can unlock from the features and things that we get from that. So here, when we talk about the human-centric experience, it goes beyond the traditional focus on employee-centric. And it focuses on the unique experience that each of them bring in. In today's discussion with the panelists that we have here, who have had experience with the strategies, the challenges, and the opportunities that you've had in doing this transition, we look forward to hearing from you on more insights on how you have done this in your organizations. So with that, I'll open up the first question to all of you to answer maybe a minute or minute and a half on what, in your views, and how do you define human-centric experience? And what is the difference between the traditional employee-centric and the human-centric experience that we have?
Hi, good morning, and thanks, Janet, for the question. It's great to be here. Happy Wednesday, everybody. So when you talk about the transition from employee-centric to human-centric, essentially, this got accentuated about a couple of years ago. And this was, like we say, who was the Chief Transformation Officer for your organization? People say COVID. Similarly, I would say it was actually the environment around us, where the company started looking at the EVP and they started saying, what are we missing? How are we at this point in time deciding what should the employee require? What should the employee need compared to empathizing with the situation today, compared to connecting with them in this new ways of working, in this hybrid ways of working? And I think that's when the transition really happened. And for us specifically at Coca-Cola, we started looking at how do we pivot this by keeping the people, keeping our associates at the heart of everything we do, specifically in HR, when we talk about HR life processes. And then we started looking at what would life at Coke be if you were to look at a human-centric approach compared to what we think is right for our associates. And then we started looking at about 4 drivers, 4 pillars of this. The first was around growth and development. Growth and development for all our associates in line with their aspirations and capability. And of course, these are very loaded words for this HR community, where we talk about capability, competence, ability. But we looked at how can we provide growth for everybody. And some cases and points where we look at bringing inclusive programs. So people know that, they are able to learn at their own pace. They're able to learn programs, and they're able to build careers. They're able to switch careers. They're able to move laterally. So providing growth. The second pillar is about creating that sense of belongingness, which is all about how do you redefine diversity, inclusion with equity. And you start looking at these resource groups, which will help you to propagate this. So it's not just owned by you, but this is actually a kind of a group or a network that you're establishing. The third element that we want to talk about is the well-being aspect. And when we talk about well-being, it's not just about the safety and the security that you provide to your associates. They are one of your greatest assets. It's also about the overall well-being. When we talk about the employee associate or the employee assistance programs, when we talk about the mental well-being, right? And we talk about rewards. How do my rewards pivot towards providing well-being and sense of security for my associates at different stages in their careers? And then the third, or rather the fourth pillar, will be around creating that sense of community, that network, the wider purpose of why we exist. So what is that bold purpose that people want to associate for? And what am I trying to do for the community? Whether that is me trying to empower 25,000 women in the country by providing them basic financial acumen, Whether that is about 10,000 students from my markets, where I talk about how do we equip them skills so they can be more employable. Whether that is about as simple as providing clean drinking water for the 1670 manufacturing facilities I have in that community, in that commune, right? So it's about that network and that community that we need to provide. So these would be the 4 drivers that we look at of transitioning from the employee-centric to human-centric.
Thank you, Gaurav.
I think Gaurav covered a lot of good aspects. I'll only say a few things. Transition is enabled through technology, I would say, and a lot of focus from shifting from what we've done traditionally for employees. We are leveraging technology in most of my current and in my current and my previous companies. I've seen when I started my career, there was less use of technology, more of Excel versus data dashboards that are available right now. So we are leveraging technology to see also what's the pulse from the employee, what do they want, and stuff like that. I would call out that when we focus on employee experience in our company, we are looking at a couple of things. One, really putting the employee at the heart of everything and shifting from them being as a person, bringing their whole self versus treating them as a worker of the company or a resource of the company, right? And when you shift to that, there are a lot of other things because the expectation of employees have also shifted that, you focus beyond me, beyond my office to my workplace. Pandemic actually accelerated all of that, right? Thinking about their family, extended family, health care. So from physical health care to mental health care or rather mental well-being, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, belongingness has seen a shift in the last 3 years more than ever, in the probably 3 decades or maybe 1 decade in the past, right? 3 or 4 things that I would really call out. One, I think what really matters to employee is when you look as a holistic personality, one is, I would put it as 3 or 4 C's. One is the culture of the company, which is very, very important for them. I'll not go into much details. I'll let my colleagues also talk about it here. The second one is the charter that they handle. The second C I would call out. The meaningful work, how do you gainfully keep employees engaged in the workspace? And everybody's need is different. What will motivate me may be very different from what would motivate a Bhavya or a Krishna or a Janet or a Gaurav, right? So how do you really meaningful engage in the scope of work that you have? The third thing that I would call out is, the company brand value in itself, right? What is it that you're offering differently, both from a compensation and, benefits perspective, which is unique for the employees? And lastly, I think, technology, which we leverage to pulse the employees and bring the differentiation, database decision making and stuff like that.
A lot has already been said, but just a few things, and I think we can take a step back and probably learn a little from product development or marketing, right? Because human-centric essentially would mean the same thing whether we look at the population who works for us or we look at it from a consumer customer standpoint, right? It basically means that as an organization, when I look at the set of people who are working for all of us, we are not looking at what is it that we want to provide to them, but what is it that their desires are, how do we look at them as human beings beyond just being employees of any organization. And I think that itself is the shift that we need to make. And I do think that whether it's marketing or products that we look at, there we do it, right? We don't say that this is a product I want to design and let me go and launch it and then see what's the best way to sell it. That's a recipe for disaster. You would always start with saying, what's the consumer need? And, when I was reading about this topic, many years back, I read about this case study that Oral-B did. It's not an organization that I've worked with. I don't know the details, but when I read it, I felt that it was a very nice example for all of us to think about. They said that, they were looking at toothbrushes, and they said that probably children is a different segment, and they need to look at how children brush their teeth, and that they need to have different toothbrushes for children. And obviously, the most intuitive thing to do is that a child is a smaller version of an adult, so make a smaller toothbrush for a child. But that's not what they did. What they did was they went and studied a lot of children while they were brushing their teeth, and they realized that the thinner toothbrushes or the smaller versions of the adult toothbrushes were very uncomfortable for children because of their motor skills, because they were not able to manage it, and it was not working well. So that little insight they came back and used, and they said that we need to design this product differently because the person who needs to use it is different. And what are the needs and desires of that person? And hence I would say that comparing, and it's been a journey, right? Right from utility to, just basic level of engagement, experience, etc., and now to human-centric. I do think that we are evolving, but there's a long distance to go. I think that a few pivots that are required are around the level of authenticity with which we do whatever we do, the level of customization that we genuinely are able to offer, and hence the deeper level of connect that you are able to establish with that person, much more than that person being an employee of yours or not. And obviously, I totally agree with all the areas of work that both Gaurav and Shelley spoke about. So that's what I'd like to add.
So I think great points. First of all, Janet, I think you defined human-centric experience very beautifully at the start. And I completely agree with Bhavya here. It's not a new concept or construct. Actually, if you think about how we build products, as Bhavya mentioned, all through the last few decades, we don't think about anything else other than user-centric design. We think about the user and we design for the user. I think all great products are built like that. So why not actually build experiences similarly for our employees within our workspaces in the very similar vein, is the way I think about it. So at Flipkart, for instance, I think our entire people purpose has always been around maximizing everybody's potential and well-being. And you can't maximize potential without understanding the needs of that user, first of all. So at the core of it, it's the user. So what we actually did, in fact, earlier this year, is we pivoted the entire people strategy of the company to say, we are not going to function like HR functions within rewards, HR BPs, talent development. We are going to pivot ourselves to completely persona-based approach. So we're going to say, what are the different personas that exist in the company today? For instance, there's a candidate who is aspiring to join Flipkart. There's a new joiner. There's a person who's actually become a manager for the first time. There's a returning mother. The needs of each of these personas are fundamentally different. So the need of, for instance, a returning mother is the anxiety around making sure that the role is there. What kind of a role am I going to come back to? The need of a first-time leader who's managing multiple managers is very different. What does it mean to become a leader of leaders is the first skill I need to develop. So I think going really deep in terms of defining your personas, understanding through continuous listening to your employees, what are their experiences that they're looking for in the company, and then solving for it in a very holistic manner across the board. Starting from hire to retire, be it your rewards philosophy, be it your aspects around how you build your talent, everything has to actually revolve around personas. And that's when true magic really happens, because you start to deliver these very pointed and relevant experiences to your employees based on their stage in their career in the company.
Thank you. Thank you, each of you, for your points. I think that was very valid. And like you said, this is not a new concept. This is evolving and becoming much more focused, because we realize with changing times, this is something that is very important. And the roles that we play especially, I think from being seen as rule makers or like a principal or a hostel warden to now be more empathetic and supportive, I think that has been a huge transformation, that we've moved out of being just transactional and getting more into employee focus, like they rightly said, about individuals' needs that we are addressing. I think that's where we are kind of moving into to set the future. On that note, for any of these kind of transformation, we surely need our leadership support. Without leadership supporting us, I think this is not going to really get any further. So on that note, I'd like to understand from probably Gaurav and Bhavya, both of you could share your thoughts on how does leadership help in fostering such change in getting into the human-centric environment? And the second part of the question is, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you, what was the outcome? How did you succeed from that?
I would say, I think you already said it, right? Leadership support, in fact, leadership buy-in and alignment and leading from the front is obviously very, very critical. So there's no two ways about it, because I think we're talking about a different approach, right? Which again, like I said earlier, is a common approach when we look at consumers and customers. But it's not the approach that you look at internally, and hence getting the leadership to understand that ideally should not be very difficult, because we are doing it in another aspect. But sometimes it is, and which is where I think, he spoke about looking at it from a persona perspective, or just that, whole design thinking of putting your employees at the center and then saying what is it that they want, right? And building things around that. I would say that one of the practical challenges in that also is that then it does take more time. It's not just about saying that there's a process that exists or there's a tool which I can buy, and I come from a technology company, right? Anything that you can think of, obviously there is a technology available that can be enabled or can be built at least. If it doesn't exist right now, I'm sure we have the capability to build it at least. But having said that, it's not about that. It has to start with what is the need. And I think a lot of times in organizations, we are very impatient, right? Immediately when you think that, okay, I want to do something in this domain, it's very easy to go out and say, okay, there are 5 things that exist. Does something fit my bill? And if it doesn't fit my bill, I'll say, okay, can I tweak it a little? Right, and maybe 20% changes, and then I can implement it in my organization. Or if I'm sitting here, Bhavya spoke about a great best practice from Lenovo. How can I twist that and use it in my organization? That's a great approach, yes, but it's also fundamentally different from what we're trying to solve for. We're saying that, who is your company? Who are your people? What is it that they are looking for? And hence, can we start from there? It does require a far more patient, working through kind of an approach compared to what we are used to, which is far more efficiency, quickly, okay, here's a problem and here's a solution, technology or otherwise. So I think that is a thing that we need to solve for ourselves. If we are truly convinced that this is the right approach, then we have to follow that approach. Because if you go to any product development office, right, any kind of an organization, and you go and tell them that here is the problem that I'm trying to solve, they're not going to tell you tomorrow, come back and I have a solution. They will say that I have this cycle, when I have to go to consumers, I have to talk to them, I have to do testing, and blah, blah, blah. There's a whole process to it. But unfortunately, we don't always work like that. Right, so I think that is a challenge. The other one, I wouldn't say is a challenge, but something that we need to work through much more is, again, our need, right, to have standardization, to have policies and processes, which is great. Obviously, if you run a large organization, you do need to have a certain level of, uniformity, standardization existing. But within all of that, how is it that you can look at a person as a person? And what is the difference that you can make? And in the previous session, I was hearing that term, again, a very often used term and a very relevant one, which is in that moment that matters. What is it that you're able to deliver to that person? And I don't think that fundamentally as organizations, we are designed like that. Yeah. You're designed for optimization, for efficiency, for doing things better in a faster way at a better cost. But I think increasingly in moments that matter, are you able to take a step back and say, okay, am I willing to make this exception and not just hide behind a process or a policy and say not possible? Can I look at this person and say genuinely what does he or she need, and is it possible to provide that? And then stand by your decision later to say why I did it for this person, but for another person it's not the same context. Because very often we fall back. So in summary, I would say leadership alignment, understanding, buy-in, and full-fledged support is obviously required. But alongside that, we have to be cognizant of how we are designed as organizations and what shift does this approach need.
So building on to what Bhavya said, I think you covered it pretty well. And for me, I would actually put it at a conceptual level. So when you talk about human-centered design thinking, you start with defining what are we trying to solve for. And then around that, you build empathy around your user base. And empathetically, you understand how you can look at different options available, and then what is outlandish, and then you kind of converge towards a few prototypes and then get into solutioning mode. I think for me, now bringing down to practical about what we are trying to do at HCCB Coca-Cola, we started our transformation journey exactly the same way. We tried to address what are we trying to solve for. And from there, we started looking at if I were to put myself in the shoes of the user, the associate essentially, what are the challenges, the pain points that I go through? And how would my bold vision help to sort that out? And we kind of work towards a culture on three pillars. First, we started about how do you create that sense of energy around your bold purpose and vision. So people are clear about what are you trying to do. If it's a moonshot for you, it should be a moonshot for all your colleagues. And they should understand that, yes, this is something I want to sign up for. And this is going to help me go through my employee journey, my roadmap in this organization, and make me more accomplished, make me more successful. The second piece was around creating that sense of, when we talk about energy, the culture of energy, it's about creating that sense of relational affinity, the relational capital. And we noticed that it had got substantially diluted over the last 2-3 pandemic years. And how do we start building on that in this new ways of working? When people are working through screens, how do you still continue that connect, that communication, that collaboration, right? And we started looking at how can we provide these pause moments so people can refresh, connect, and come back re-energized to the organization. So that was all about the culture of energy, which helped us to get the right start by putting people at the heart of everything that we do. The second was all around building this culture of evolution, because we need to move from where we were to where we want to take the organization. Essentially, moving from the utility aspect of work towards the experiential aspect of work. And when you talk about this transition, you are talking about putting the people and their individual aspirations at the heart of it, which could be bespoke, which would be different for different organizations, because all our journeys are different, our problems are different. After you define that, it's about how do you create that comfort in the organization where people find it's all right to say I failed. It's psychologically a safe place for people to raise their hand and say, I don't know how this journey adds up. I don't know what to do. I don't know my role in this. And this is very practical. How many times do we or our teams come up to us and say, sorry, I messed up, right? I don't know what to do next. So how do you create those bubbles of safety where people can come and own up? And then you can provide them the right coaching guidance. Yes, of course, there are guide rails on terms of the code of business conduct, which we will not cross, but everything within that, how can you provide that sense of safety? How can you create that opportunity for people to be agile, experiment, work through sprints, right? And that is the culture of evolution, how the organization moves forward, and you're able to bring everybody along with you. And then finally, when the rubber hits the road, because we are here to achieve a certain purpose, right, for the shareholder, for our organization, it's about execution. It's about ensuring that we are able to achieve what we have committed. It's about how do we break the barriers, how do we create that sense of accountability, which is ownership, closing the loop end to end, and creating that sense of ownership and belief in the associates that we will be able to remove roadblocks that they see. And when you are able to bring these three elements of the culture from the leadership team, and people start understanding what's the role they play in this, right? By keeping their interests, their bespoke interests in mind, I think that's where the real magic happens. And to give you a specific example of what we are trying to do to ensure this gets legs, so this doesn't stay at the conceptual level, we are now ensuring that the communication on the energy aspect of work, the bold purpose, is immersive. So all our associates understand, and what does it mean for them? So this is not a BHAG which makes a lot of sense to the top leaders, but this is actually attributed descriptor-wise for each and every associate. What would it mean for me? And in very simple Indian terms, which is karna kya hai, right? And moving on from there, we start talking about how do you make it integrative. When I talk about making the organization a great place to work, it's about simplification, dramatic simplification of our processes, systems, people processes, people systems, right? And when you start designing these processes by keeping their interests in mind, you start looking at what can you automate, what can you eliminate, and what can you elevate. All our processes. So in our organization, there are about 86 processes for people. So we are looking at each of them and looking at what can be eliminated, what can be automated, what can be elevated. So the experience that the user has, the associate has, is very different. And then last, when, like I said, when we try and connect it, experiential aspect. Are people actually experiencing the change, or is it getting relegated only to the books or to the notes or to the slides? So how do you ensure that you're able to close the loop? That complete PDAC cycle, right? So you're able to get the feedback, you're able to close the loop, you're able to make those calibrations, recalibrations, so you can continue to take the associates forward. And being absolutely vulnerable and telling the associates what you know, what you don't know, where you want their help, and where we need to find solutions together. So I think that's really how we are bringing our leadership team towards making this journey real.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Can I add a perspective here? I think Bhavya did mention that, a copy paste may not necessarily always work in terms of challenges I'm talking about. What's unique to your company sometimes is very unique within your company to a certain team or a certain region also, right? So I would say, and I completely agree with what also Krishna said here, that there are a lot of persona-based interventions that a lot of, organizations are kind of implementing and, rolling out initiatives, etc. What also matters is, when something is at an enterprise level, you will kind of, because it's coming from the center and enterprise, it's the org level stuff. But then what's unique for your region and how you and your leadership are identifying those challenges proactively, that's something where I would say at Intel, we really focus a lot, right? There are specific things that only will work for India and are unique for India, but may not work for the US. Or what's working for the US may not, or Israel or Malaysia or wherever our global presence are, in terms of R&D, may not work for in India, right? And how do we really cater to those specifically for our employees, whether it's on tech development or leadership development or even compensation benefits? That's something that we are really focusing on, balancing, what's the common platform, and then what can we really customize and optimize for our employees and make the experience elevated.
Thank you, Shelly. I think both of you, Gaurav and Bhavya, brought this point about building for the need. And I think that is what is the essence here. And you, Shelly, when you spoke about the leadership's involvement, I think walking the talk and then being communicative and being open is going to be very important when you're going to be bringing in a transformational change like this. Thank you for the insights on that one. And again, I also want to add on the leadership piece. I think the emotional intelligence that the leaders carry is going to be huge for us when we're going to make a transition like this from an employee experience to a human-centric experience. Moving on, they say that you're in the future when HR starts upgrading their AI tools. So with that, in the era where the integration of the workplace is very high on the AI, we'd like to know from you, Krishna and Shaili, on how does this influence the employee experience? And what considerations should one take when you're trying to harmonize technology and human touch? Just saying the word technology and human touch in one breath itself feels like it's a paradox. But yeah, we'd like to hear from you on how technology and human touch is something that we can bring together.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I think there's a lot that's spoken of, obviously, conversational AI, not to mention OpenAI's leadership stuff that's going on. But I think the way we should look at technology in the space, and particularly AI in the space of HR as well, is that how can we actually deliver those superlative experiences by leveraging technology? And in fact, enhancing the human touch is the way I see it. And I'd like to talk about two very relevant examples. So the first one is how most companies have a shared services model for pretty much all of their employees. And how do you sort of handle the different kinds of queries that come in? And today, many of the companies, organizations deal with them through a shared services org. But if you actually leverage technology in that space, your ability to pinpoint, address that query with great amount of relevance and quality of resolution is greatly enhanced. For instance, through a kind of a ChatGPT enabled chatbot as an example, right? Because now you have these huge language models that can be very relevant, customized for your domain. You could be, for instance, in the area of benefits, talent development, name it. You can create a very large repository and use that to actually address your incoming employee queries. So from that perspective, you can greatly actually enhance the human touch. And therefore, your shared services group can be leveraged, therefore, to address even more complex queries. Today, that they're actually addressing a lot of sort of mundane queries that might be coming in. That's one example. Second, I'd like to talk about is this aspect around potential again, which is at the core of every human being is their ability to maximize their potential, what they bring to themselves to work every day. And if you think about it, everybody has an aspiration to get somewhere. Somebody's aspiration could be spelled about in terms of career growth. Somebody could be talking about a skill. Now, how do you address that at scale for hundreds of thousands of employees? And how do you enhance that from a human touch experience? That's where technology again comes to the rescue, right? So if you think about an AI-enabled talent marketplace, as an example, which we've deployed at Flipkart, it's able to now map your aspiration to the set of skills that you need to acquire at any point in time, access to learning which is relevant to getting that skill, and the ability for you to search for mentors who are already proficient in that skill to be able to mentor you. So from every angle, if you think about this, what you could do with a talent development team which is generally short-staffed with 4 or 5 people for a 1,000-member organization, now you can address even hundreds of thousands of people using technology. And the experience that you're able to deliver is that which is actually driven by human touch because its relevance, it's personalized, it's very much catered to what your aspiration is. So I think technology can be greatly leveraged, and the 2 use cases that I actually talked about are case in point for that.
Yeah, I think you really shared some relevant examples, and I'll talk beyond this because we use this, so repeating won't make sense. I can talk about 2 more things that we do at Intel, which is unique by leveraging technology, somewhat similar to what he just called in terms of shared services and hiring. There's a lot of AI that we build in external tool and internals that we are using, where I'll not talk about external, let's talk about internal, because we believe in the culture of really propagating growth from within, and the search engine is built in a way, rather enabled in a way that it really pops your internal talent profiling. So we have a repository of tools and talent skills available, and then when you do the search, it pops up, what's a great fitment for a candidate which is internally available in the relevant skill pool. Likewise, when internal candidates are doing search for themselves, they also are able to filter the jobs that meet their requirement or gigs that are coming up and that may interest them. That's one of the use case. The second one, which is really close to my heart, I personally believe in technology, is just become like a part of you. I feel mobile is an extended organ for me, and I feel it's for everybody. None of us can live without it, and we breathe and live technology. And I'm a big person who believe that data and data-driven insight really helps and empower us as HR to influence our business to take the right kind of decision in terms of people space. The closest to my heart is predictive analytics, and we are doing a lot of work in that space. We have a talent analytics team who's built a beautiful predictive analytics tool which leverages multiple factors, which are I believe 70 plus factors or so. I may be wrong, but a lot of factors that go into a tool and defines what could be the trigger for attrition risk for individuals, And that is something that we leverage and empower through data for our managers, that these are the early warning signals that are coming up. What could be prescriptive for them, and how do you leverage to retain those critical talents very proactively, because you can't go and save all employees, right? Attrition is going to happen. Market is very competitive. But who are the ones that you really don't want to lose, and how do you proactively address them? That's something that we are really working effectively, and we are actually doing a lot of work from India as pilot, in that space.
Thank you, Shaili.
Thanks.
Thank you, Krishna. This is a vast topic. Just talking about AI or technology itself, it's a whole day's topic. And we were just scratching the surface. I'm aware that we are up on time. Do we have one question? Okay. Now it's time for, there, thank you. That was quick.
So my name is Amruta. I'm from HCX. Good morning to the panelists. It was wonderful insights coming from you all. I have a question for Gaurav Sharma. So you mentioned a word called agile when you were explaining about the planning, sprint plannings and all. So I have a question related to that. Also, Krishna mentioned about persona-based training, and then earlier to this, even Sir mentioned about hyper-personalization, right? So what I want to know is, in all of this, does agile training approach help, when we are talking about all of these things? So I just want to understand, when we are talking about open mindset, communication, When these things and qualities we are talking, does agile training approach for the employees play a vital role? Does that help?
So I can go first. Okay. So it's a classical, and I think I don't want to kind of belabor it. That's 70, 20, 10. So while learning is only that 10%, and about 20% is what you converse with your leaders, with your stakeholders, and that 70% is what you learn on the job. And agility survives and thrives in that 70%. And being agile, while you can go for trainings and you can go for certifications, but it's really your mindset. It's about how you work, and it's about failing first to go fast, and it's about ensuring that you're constantly in that iterative model. So in Coca-Cola, we call it model 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So, and that's how things happen. So in our organization, we have a model, and you were talking about different use cases. So we have a model, we've seen it, and then we do a quick feedback. We realize, this is working. So from the options of completely shelving it, to an option of tweaking it, to an option of adopting it, we have all these options. And the best part is your interest, or rather your belief in that product, is only to the point if it's solving the problem or not. It's not that because I've said it, I want to make it succeed at whatever cost, because you don't want to chase madness, right? So Agile, I think, is a mindset, while training will help, but it's about how you bring this into your day-to-day approach.
Exactly. So that's what the approach I was expecting. Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just one thing I wanted to add to what Gaurav said is that agile training, I can't actually emphasize enough design thinking, particularly for the HR function itself, because to break out of the mindset of thinking functional to thinking boundary-less and problem-based, persona-based is a massive shift for HR itself. So I think design thinking would be my next bet, yeah.